Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into a grimy, whiskery world where you, yes you, become the stuff of rat nightmares, a medieval rat hunter. Imagine waking up before dawn, bleary-eyed, and realising your entire job is to stalk the shadows of a village crawling with rodents that think they own the place. Spoiler alert, they probably do. And you're about to be their least favourite human. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always a kick seeing who's up at this hour, probably dealing with their own rat problems, real or metaphorical. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're roused from a restless sleep by a chorus of tiny, frantic scrabbling noises like the universe's worst kind of alarm clock. The village's rats are already up, as usual, conducting their daily mayhem. You're lying on a straw mattress, a bit stiff from last night's cramped quarters. Your cot smells faintly of something between damp hay and old cheese. But hey, it's home, or at least the best you've got. Outside, the faint glow of dawn seeps through the thatched roof, but the sun won't chase away the rats anytime soon. Your breath catches as you listen. The rats are everywhere, somewhere beneath the floorboards, others darting along the walls. They don't wait for permission to invade your space. They're practically the landlords of this place, and you, the rat hunter, are the unwelcome tenant assigned the impossible task of evicting them. The role you've inherited is no joke. Being a medieval rat hunter is less glam than it sounds. Forget swords and armour. You wield traps, sticks, and a keen eye. Your job isn't just about personal hygiene or keeping your granary intact. It's about protecting your whole village from the chaos these furry invaders can unleash. Let's set the scene properly. It's the 14th century, and hygiene is, well, let's say medieval. Bathing is rare and often suspicious. So, yes, you and your fellow villagers all smell roughly the same, which means you're not just fighting rats, but the invisible nastiness they bring with them: fleas, ticks, and most dangerously, the plague. Historians still argue whether rat infestations were as widespread as some accounts claim. But there's no doubt that rats thrived in the cramped, filthy conditions of medieval villages, and you, dear hunter, are their sworn enemy. Your day begins before the village rooster crows. You grab your rudimentary toolkit, a handful of wooden traps, a battered leather bag of bait, usually stale bread, soaked in something foul-smelling, and a sturdy stick with a sharpened end. The stick doubles as a club and a tool to poke into dark crevices, trying not to be the one who gets bitten or scratched. First things first, you check the traps you set the night before. The thing about rats is that they're sneakier than your nosiest neighbour, and twice as fast. Some traps are empty, and you curse under your breath, imagining the rats laughing at your incompetence. Others snap shut with a satisfying clack. Though the sight of a squashed rodent is equal parts victory and stomach churner, you've learned to keep your distance. There's a limit to how much dead rat you can stomach before the smell starts clawing at your senses. Sometimes, to get closer to these creatures, you have to venture into the dark underbelly of the village, the granaries, barns, even the cesspits where rats feast on discarded scraps and waste. It's not glamorous work, and you have to brace yourself against more than just rats. Fleas hop from fur to skin, and at any moment, a rat might scurry out and surprise you, sending you tumbling over a pile of hay like a startled goat. Your clothes are patchy, your boots worn thin. You're probably the only person in the village who wears a permanent layer of dirt and grime. But it's a badge of honour after all. If you don't do your job, no one else will, and the rats will throw a never-ending party in the food stores. A curious fact in some villages: rat hunters were paid with scraps, a few coins, or the occasional loaf of bread. not exactly a fortune, but better than starving alongside the rats. The irony isn't lost on you. You live among them, fight them daily, and yet you're the only one who truly fears their growing numbers. You might think the rats just want to nibble a bit and scamper off, but these rodents are survivors, fast breeders. With teeth sharp enough to gnaw through wood and clothing, they carry fleas, and those fleas carry the plague bacterium Yersinia pestis. Little did you know. Every rat you trap might be a walking, or rather crawling, virus carrier. You sometimes wonder if you're just a pawn in a much bigger game, caught between humans and creatures that seem to multiply faster than you can kill them. The plague, of course, would arrive years later, but even now, your fight feels like a war of attrition. Historians still argue whether individual rat hunters actually slowed the spread of plague, but your efforts keep the granaries less infested and the village's food supply from total ruin. That's something. Mid-morning, you take a brief break, leaning on your stick, watching the village bustle. Women hang laundry that probably smells better than you. Kids run by chasing chickens, and the local blacksmith hammers away at horseshoes. They go about their lives, oblivious or indifferent to the rat army creeping just beneath their feet. A rat hunter's life is a paradox, part warrior, part janitor. You carry no glory, only the endless responsibility of keeping the vermin at bay. Your hands are scratched, your clothes torn, but your spirit is as stubborn as the rats themselves. You resume your patrol, sliding quietly along the edges of buildings, checking holes in the walls, and setting fresh bait. Your eyes adjust to the dim light as you enter a barn. The smell of hay, animal waste, and musty grain fills your nostrils. You pause, listening there. The faint scuttle of paws, the flick of a tail. In that instant, adrenaline surges. You move swiftly, snapping a trap shut just before the rat darts away. Success tastes like victory, though you're sure the rat will tell its friends all about you. Rats have been both the bane and the backbone of medieval life, destroying crops and food, but also fueling legends, superstitions, and sometimes even commerce rat pelts. Anyone your role, while grim, is woven into the fabric of survival. As the sun climbs, your work continues, you're exhausted but can't stop. The rats don't take breaks, and neither can you. By evening, the village is quieter. Rats begin their second shift nighttime marauders. You prepare for another round. Setting traps by hearth fires and kitchen floors, your reputation grows. To the rats, you are a nightmare. To the villagers, you're a necessary, if underappreciated, hero. And this is just day one, but tomorrow, you'll learn how to sharpen your skills, turn stealth into a weapon, and maybe, just maybe, get the upper hand in this endless war. The first thing you realise about medieval rats, besides their utter disregard for your personal space, is just how weirdly smart and adaptable these little furballs are. You thought they were just vermin that scurried around looking for crumbs? Think again. These creatures practically wrote the manual on survival in a world full of booby traps, angry villagers, and the occasional church bell toll reminding everyone to mind their manners. Rats in your village are mostly the black rat Rattus ratus, a species practically tailor-made for medieval life. Their slender bodies allow them to slip through cracks no human hand could fit. They've got claws sharper than your carving knife and teeth that grow continuously, forcing them to gnaw constantly, usually on anything they can sink their incisors into, like your grain sacks, wooden beams, and, if you're unlucky, your clothing. Here's the kicker. These rats aren't just pests, they're social masterminds. They live in complex colonies with established hierarchies. You might catch a rat pausing at the entrance of a hole, as if sentry keeping, making sure the coast is clear before allowing others to emerge and cause chaos. If you think setting one trap will solve the problem, think again. They have a sixth sense for danger, often testing traps with one brave or foolish scout before the rest scamper away. One of your least favourite facts rats communicate through high-frequency sounds you can't hear without special equipment. Coordinating their raids and escape plans. It's like they have their own secret rat radio. Meanwhile, you're out here trying to outwit a species that's basically been running this village's underground operations since forever. You might chuckle at how rats are surprisingly picky eaters, despite their reputation. They're neophobic, which means they're suspicious of new foods and objects. That explains why sometimes your well-laid bait just sits untouched, while other times you're amazed how fast a trap gets sprung. It's like you're playing a high-stakes game of will they eat it or not every time you set a trap. Oh, and speaking of bait, medieval rat hunters, yourself included, mostly rely on stale bread soaked in ale. Cheese, or even scraps of meat, you'd think rats would go for the fresh stuff. But apparently, they prefer that familiar, slightly rank aroma. Go figure. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers overestimated the damage rats caused. Some chroniclers blamed rats for all manner of misfortune, while others insisted it was mostly the humans' own filth and neglect to blame. Either way, it's clear that your enemy has thrived thanks to human habits, cramped living, open food storage, and piles of garbage just waiting to be raided. You sometimes wonder if rats got a VIP pass to your village. They seem to hang out everywhere: kitchens, granaries, stables, even the damp basements of the Lord's Manor. Their nesting spots are legion dark, cosy, and conveniently located right where they can snatch a bite or a crumb. A quirky tidbit to consider: in some places, people believed that rats had almost magical powers. There were legends that rats could detect witchcraft, or that they were messengers of the devil. You, however, are more focused on making sure they don't turn your granary into their personal buffet, although you do sometimes half wish you had a magic spell to banish them once and for all. The rat's reproductive power is legendary. One female rat can produce upwards of 40 babies a year. You do the math. No wonder they keep coming back. No matter how many traps you set or how many you club on the head, it's a full-time job trying to keep their numbers down. And you're stuck in the middle of it, armed with little more than determination and a few primitive tools. Here's something most people don't know. Rats are surprisingly clean animals. They groom themselves obsessively and have specific areas designated as toilets within their nests. The problem: their nests are usually inside your food storage. So much for hygiene. As the day wears on, you track their trails: tiny footprints in the dust, gnaw marks on wood, little droppings that sound disgusting but tell you everything you need to know about where the rats are gathering. You're developing a sixth sense, learning to predict their moves. One of your proudest moments as a rat hunter is when you manage to identify the main entry points into your barn or granary. Usually a gap no wider than your thumb, and you carefully seal them with mud, straw and wood. It's like building a fortress, but your enemy is so persistent they're always testing for weaknesses. Oh, and here's a fringe fact for you. Some medieval folks believed that hanging a dead rat in the rafters could ward off other rats. You can imagine the smell. Historians still argue whether such superstitions had any practical effect, but you're pretty sure that the stench alone kept people and rats away. By now, you've probably noticed that the rat problem isn't just about ruined food. These creatures are carriers of fleas, and those fleas carry a deadly secret: the bacterium that causes the plague, though you won't know that for a long time. Your job as a rat hunter might just be the first line of defence against one of history's deadliest pandemics. So, every rat you catch isn't just a small victory against gnawing and noise, it's a battle against the invisible dangers they bring. You may not have a fancy title or a shiny sword, but in a very real way, you're a frontline warrior. And if you think being a rat hunter sounds glamorous, remember this: the job is dirty, smelly, and often thankless. The villagers might grumble about the rats, but when you show up covered in grime and smelling faintly of hay and rat droppings, they don't exactly throw a parade. Still, you keep going, because if you don't, who will rats multiply like wildfire, and without you, the village's food stores won't stand a chance. As the afternoon fades into evening, you prepare for the next phase of your work, the night shift, because while the village settles down, the rats wake up, ready to take over once more. And that's when the real hunt begins. You might think your rat hunting toolkit is going to be a dazzling array of medieval gadgets, like a tiny crossbow, some magical powder, or perhaps a rat-zapping wand powered by alchemy. Nope. Instead, you're handed a motley collection of humble but surprisingly effective tools that make you question if you're hunting rats or playing a prolonged game of catch the twitchy pest. First up, the traps. These aren't your modern snap traps, but wooden contraptions that click shut when a rat takes the bait. Simple, yes, but effective, assuming the rat isn't clever enough to nab the bait without triggering the mechanism. Sometimes you swear these rats have PhDs in trap avoidance. You also carry a hefty stick, probably the closest thing you have to a weapon. This stick isn't just for whacking rats, it's your probing device, poking into holes and shadows where rats like to hide. It doubles as a weapon against surprise rat attacks. Yes, rats can be surprisingly aggressive, and a handy tool to sweep away cobwebs or loosen dirt to plug up entryways. Your bait, by the way, is a whole saga in itself, usually. It's stale bread soaked in something pungent like ale or even leftover meat scraps. You'd think rats would be picky about freshness, but apparently they're the original foodies of aged cuisine. There's a rumour floating around the village that if you use rotten cheese, rats will be drawn like moths to a flame. It's the rat version of a gourmet invitation. Beyond traps and sticks, you might carry a net for those rare moments when you catch sight of a rat in the open and decide to play a game of quick hands. Nets aren't the most reliable tools. Rats tend to wriggle free, leaving you flailing and cursing under your breath. Oh, and you have a torch or lantern for nighttime work. Lighting a small fire or carrying a candle might seem romantic, but in reality, it's just so you don't stumble into rat holes or worse, step on a sleeping snake, or a pile of who knows what. Plus, rats hate the light, so you use it to your advantage, chasing them into traps or out into the open. Now here's a quirky medieval twist some rat hunters kept a pet ferret or weasel. These slender, agile creatures were natural rat catchers, and having one on your side meant an extra pair of paws and teeth in the fight. The downside, ferrets have minds of their own, and sometimes your ally ends up causing more chaos than the rats. You also carry a leather pouch filled with miscellaneous rat hunting supplies, from bits of rope to sharp knives for cutting and patching traps. Sometimes you throw in herbs like rosemary or lavender, believed to repel rats, or at least make the smell of rat droppings less offensive. Your nose appreciates the effort, even if the rats don't. And then there's your trusty leather apron, not just for style points though. In your eyes, it does add a certain rugged charm. It's protection against bites and scratches. A rat bite can get infected, and in times before antibiotics, an infection could be deadly. So you treat this apron like a suit of armour, though it's really just thick, worn leather patched up in multiple places. You'll also find that rat hunters often wore gloves, usually rough, patched up leather that give you a little buffer when handling traps or dead rats. Gloves aren't popular among all hunters though. Some believe they reduce dexterity, making it harder to set tricky traps or scoop up squirming rodents. Here's a fun fact: medieval rat hunters sometimes carried a small bell. No, not to charm the rats, but to warn others of your approach. If you've ever tried to sneak around a village on a rat hunt, you know how important it is not to startle livestock or awake sleeping neighbours. The bell announces your presence, so you don't get a thrown bucket of water for stepping on toes or worse. Rouse the village dogs. Speaking of dogs, some rat hunters had small terriers bred specifically to chase down rats. These dogs were a mixed blessing, enthusiastic, but sometimes too eager, resulting in more chaos than control. You've got to be a multitasker holding traps, waving torches, and calming a hyperactive dog, all while keeping an eye out for the wily rats. While these tools seem primitive, they were refined over generations. Rat hunting wasn't a casual pastime, it was serious survival. Every trap, every bait choice, every hole you plugged mattered. The success of your village's harvest, and in darker times, even its health depended on your efficiency. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some medieval texts recommend using crocodile dung as a rat repellent. You read that right. It sounds like a prank, but the pungent smell was believed to drive rats away. While historians debate if this was actually used or just exaggerated travel tales. You're pretty sure you'd rather face 100 rats than a bucket of that stuff. By sunset, your tools have been tested thoroughly, traps sprung, baits refreshed, entry points sealed as best as you can manage. Your fingers are sore, your clothes dirtier than ever, but the satisfaction of a day's work done is undeniable. Tomorrow, you'll learn the subtle art of patience and stealth, because no amount of tools can replace the skill of blending into the shadows and outsmarting an opponent as elusive as a medieval rat. Now, if you think rat hunting is just about setting traps and swinging sticks wildly, you're in for a rude awakening. The real art of the trade is stealth and patience, a lethal combination that turns you from a mere pest controller into a shadowy ninja of the medieval village. This isn't a job for the impatient or clumsy. Oh no, this is precision work, requiring you to blend seamlessly into the murky world of dim barns, creaky wooden beams, and dusty granaries. Picture this: you're crouched behind a pile of sacks filled with grain, barely daring to breathe, every muscle tense, every sense heightened. Your job is to outthink creatures that have been around for centuries, masters of surviving and evading the human menace. You know they're out there, somewhere in the shadows, scuttling around and watching your every move. The slightest noise, a creak, a rustle could send your quarry vanishing into thin air. Stealth in medieval rat hunting isn't about fancy camouflage though, if you're lucky. Your dirt-streaked clothes do the trick. It's about learning to move slowly, deliberately, and quietly. Every step is calculated, every breath controlled. You're playing a deadly game of cat and mouse, literally. Sometimes, you learn to watch for the signs of rat activity, a scattering of droppings here, a gnawed hole there, faint scratching sounds that ripple through the wooden walls. Sometimes you spot a pair of tiny glowing eyes in the darkness, reflecting the faint light of your torch or the moon. That's your moment. Freeze, steady your hand, and wait. Waiting, it turns out, is the hardest part. Rats are masters of patience themselves. They'll dart out for a moment, test the waters, and retreat if they sense danger. You need the patience of a saint, or at least a monk with nothing but hours to kill, to wait for just the right moment to strike. It's like fishing, but with more teeth and less peace. One of your favourite tactics is what you call stillness stalking. You find a spot with signs of heavy rat traffic, maybe near a granary door or under a windowsill, and you sit, unmoving, blending into the background as best as your stinky medieval clothes allow. Hours can pass, but suddenly, a rat makes its move. You're ready. You've got to be quick and quiet when the moment comes. Rats are lightning fast and notoriously unpredictable, sometimes. They freeze when they sense you, sizing you up. Other times, they bolt at the slightest twitch. It's a test of nerves for both predator and prey. Here's a fun irony: the rats, despite being the villains of this story, have some surprising social behaviours that can work for you. They're territorial and cautious around unfamiliar objects, so placing traps and bait in just the right spots can exploit their territorial nature. They check for safety before committing to a meal, and if they survive a trap unscathed, they'll warn the others. So, your stealth and subtlety can make the difference between success and a trap quickly abandoned. If you're lucky, you might catch a rat trying to sneak past your defences, perhaps a younger, less experienced rodent who hasn't learnt to be suspicious yet. Snapping the trap at that precise moment feels like a small victory against an overwhelmingly persistent foe. Your stealth isn't only about avoiding the rats, you've also got to be mindful of the village's other inhabitants. A loud clang might wake a sleeping baby, or startle the Lord's hounds, causing a commotion that turns the whole night upside down. One time, you tripped over a bucket and nearly got chased by a furious goose, a story you still tell around the hearth for a laugh. Patience is rewarded in other ways, too, over time. You start to understand rat patterns. They're creatures of habit who return to the same feeding spots, travel along the same paths, and have favourite hiding holes. Tracking these habits allows you to anticipate their moves and set traps where they'll be most effective. But beware, patience can also be your undoing. Sitting still for hours in a cold, drafty barn means you're fighting not just rats but the chill, the creeping fatigue, and the gnawing hunger that medieval life dishes out in equal measure. You learn to bring a small flask of watered down ale, not just to keep warm, but also to steady your nerves during those long stakeouts. A quirky detail, some rat hunters keep a piece of bread with holes poked in it as bait during these stakeouts. The holes make it easier to soak up the ale or other scents that lure the rats in. You swear it works better than just plain bread, though you've never tested it scientifically. Then again, who has time for experiments when you're being outsmarted by rodents? You develop a sort of respect for these clever little creatures. They survive by outwitting larger, stronger animals, including you. This respect doesn't make your job easier, if anything. It sharpens your focus. You're playing a high-stakes mental chess game every night, as you crouch in the shadows. You also think about the bigger picture. Rats thrive because the village is crowded, filthy, and filled with opportunities for them to feast. You're not just fighting rats, you're fighting the consequences of medieval life itself. And in this fight, your patience and stealth are your greatest weapons. One wrong move, one careless noise, and the rats will disappear into their tunnels, leaving you empty-handed and frustrated. Tomorrow, you'll learn about some of your most unexpected allies in this battle, the cats and other creatures who have their own stake in making your life easier. If you thought the rat hunt was a lonely battle of you versus the rodents, think again. One of your biggest advantages and occasional sources of frustration are your unlikely allies, the cats. Yes, those sneaky, furry predators lounging lazily by the hearth when you're out chasing vermin are actually your secret weapons, at least, when they feel like working. Cats in the medieval village weren't just cute companions, they were elite rat hunters. But their work ethic, let's just say it varied. Some cats took their job very seriously, stalking the shadows with the same determination you did. Others seemed more interested in napping on warm stones or demanding their daily fish snack. You often found yourself wishing you could motivate them with a medieval version of a cat treat or a little pep talk. Cats have been hunting rats for centuries, and in medieval times they earned their keep. Their sharp reflexes and silent paws made them excellent at sneaking up on rats and catching them unawares. But cats are also independent creatures, often hunting for fun rather than survival, which means their allegiance to you was sometimes as unpredictable as the rat's escape routes. You probably learned quickly that rats knew how to avoid cats just as well as they avoided traps. Rats developed clever escape tactics, like darting through holes too small for cats or freezing in place to avoid detection. Some even took to higher ground, scampering onto rafters or beams where cats couldn't reach them. It was like a medieval game of hide and seek, only the stakes were survival. Occasionally, the cats would stage spectacular chases, knocking over pots, scattering grains, and generally causing chaos. You'd have to run after your feline colleagues as they chased a particularly bold rat through the village square, narrowly avoiding the irate baker's wrath. You'd think rats would get the last laugh, but no, they sometimes got outsmarted by their own hunters' antics. Besides cats, other creatures pitched in too. Ferrets were another popular choice for rat control. These slender, weasel-like animals were relentless hunters, slipping into tight spaces and flushing rats out of their nests. Ferrets had the advantage of sheer determination once they caught the scent of a rat. They wouldn't stop until the quarry was caught, or the ferret was exhausted, which could take a while. However, ferrets came with their own issues. They were notoriously mischievous, sometimes disappearing for days or wreaking havoc in unexpected places. You might return from a hunt to find your ferret dragging off your socks or hiding in the Lord's cellar, much to everyone's dismay. Dogs also played a minor role in rat hunting. Certain breeds, especially small terriers, were trained to chase and catch rats. These dogs were enthusiastic, if sometimes overly eager, often causing more noise and disruption than actual damage to the rats. But their presence kept rats on edge, and that was valuable. Interestingly, some villages used barn owls as natural pest control. These majestic birds would swoop silently at night, feasting on rats and mice, while you probably didn't have the luxury of hiring an owl for your rat hunts. Their presence in the countryside helped keep rodent populations in check. It's funny how nature's little team came together in the medieval village, each creature playing its part in this ongoing war against the rats. You, armed with traps and patience, cats, ferrets, and dogs, each with their own hunting styles, and even birds of prey, silently working the night shift. Yet, despite all these allies, rats remained a persistent menace. You couldn't rely on your furry friends alone some nights. You found yourself alone in the granary, facing the dark with nothing but a stick and your own wits. The relationship between you and your animal allies wasn't always smooth sailing. Cats, for instance, might suddenly decide that your carefully laid bait was an excellent snack for themselves. You'd return to find your traps untouched, but the bait missing, thanks to a mischievous tabby. Ferrets could be a double-edged sword. While effective hunters, they sometimes frightened village chickens or got into fights with dogs, causing chaos that wasn't appreciated by your neighbours. Training and handling ferrets required patience almost as much as hunting rats. Your dog, though enthusiastic, might chase a rat only to get distracted by a passing squirrel or the enticing scent of a freshly baked loaf of bread. Training them to focus on rat hunting was a challenge, one you often approached with a mix of hope and exasperation. Despite the challenges, your animal allies gave you a crucial edge. Without their help, the rat population would have grown unchecked, devouring crops and food stores, endangering the village's survival. A quirky medieval tidbit: some folks believed that carrying a cat's whisker could protect you from evil spirits, or even rats. You weren't sure if it was superstition or a clever way to get rid of your less cooperative feline, but you weren't going to argue with a little extra luck. And speaking of luck, the natural balance between predator and prey was a delicate one. If rats overran the village, cats and ferrets thrived on the bounty. But if rat numbers dwindled, your furry friends might become lazy or turn their attention to more tempting targets like your garden or the neighbour's prized poultry. Your role as a rat hunter was to maintain this balance, working alongside these animal allies to keep the rat population manageable but not eliminate it entirely. After all, in the medieval ecosystem, even rats had their place. As the sun set and you prepared for another night of hunting, you glanced over at the village cats lazily stretching on doorsteps, the ferret curled up in its cage, and the dog eagerly wagging its tail. You might have been the official rat hunter, but this was a team effort, one that required patience, skill, and a fair bit of humour. Tomorrow, the rat invasion gets serious, and you'll face the overwhelming flood of rodents that tests all your skills and sanity. You wake up with a start, the memory of last night's rat chase still fresh, and your muscles aching in places you didn't know could hurt. But there's no time to nurse bruises or complain. Today marks the true test of your rat hunting mettle, dealing with an infestation that's gone beyond manageable and has officially declared war on your village. Infestations in medieval villages were the stuff of nightmares, and your role is about to become even more critical. Rats no longer sneak in small numbers. They're swarming the barns, gnawing on food stores, and multiplying faster than you can set traps. The granaries, once a fortress against famine, now feel more like a banquet hall for every whiskered thief in town. Your day begins with a grim inspection of the damage. Bags of grain are ripped open, their contents spilled across the floor in a messy carpet of golden kernels. You find rat droppings everywhere on tables, near the hearth, even in the Lord's wine cellar. The smell is overwhelming, a pungent mix of ammonia and damp fur. You gag but push on. The village depends on you. You set traps in every corner, baiting them with the strongest smelling cheese you can scrounge. It's a game of placement and timing, knowing which paths rats prefer and which holes they frequent. You work methodically, resetting traps as soon as you find them, sprung or empty. But with the infestation this bad, it sometimes feels like pouring water into a bottomless barrel. To combat the invasion, you adopt some desperate tactics. You start burning smouldering piles of herbs, rosemary, thyme, and juniper, hoping the smoke will drive rats from their nests. It's not exactly pleasant. The smoke stings your eyes, and you cough more than the rats do, but it's worth a try. You also organise village efforts. It's not just your fight anymore. Women, children, and other able-bodied villagers join you, armed with sticks, brooms, and buckets of boiling water. Together, you stage raids on rat nests, flushing out colonies and chasing survivors into traps. This is where your leadership comes into play. Coordinating groups, sharing knowledge about rat behaviour, and assigning tasks helps amplify your efforts. The villagers look to you as their champion, the one holding back a tide of furry destruction. You try to live up to their expectations, but inside, you're counting every missed rat as a personal failure. The rats, it seems, have evolved their own counter-strategies. You find new holes dug overnight, tunnels rerouted to avoid traps, and fresh piles of droppings that signal a relentless expansion of their territory. It's almost impressive, if you didn't know how much destruction they caused. An interesting medieval note: some communities turn to public rituals to combat infestations, believing that loud noises or certain ceremonies could scare away rats. Drumming, bell ringing, even church processions were thought to cleanse the village of pestilence. Whether these methods had any real effect or just offered psychological comfort is unclear, but you'd bet the rats were more bothered by your traps than the noise. Your health starts to suffer. The constant exposure to dirt, dust, and rat droppings leaves you coughing and wheezing. Your clothes stink, and the scratches from fights with desperate rodents occasionally get infected. But quitting isn't an option. The village depends on your perseverance. By midday, you take a brief break to assess your progress. The traps have caught dozens, but the rats seem endless. The sight of another gnawed sack makes your stomach twist. The Lord Steward arrives, grumbling about lost provisions and the risk to the harvest. You swallow your frustration and promise to redouble your efforts. You're also beginning to notice a strange pattern in rats' behaviour. Some rats seem braver, venturing closer to human activity. Even during the day, you suspect these are the younger, hungrier ones, pushing boundaries because of overcrowding in their nests. It's a sign that the infestation might be outgrowing its current territory. A worrying development, a quirky tidbit in some villages. It was believed that rats who ventured into churches were under divine protection, making them harder to catch. You've seen rats scurry across the altar and disappear into cracks behind religious icons. You're not sure if it's superstition or just rats taking advantage of undisturbed spaces, but it adds an amusing complication to your work. The evening approaches, and you prepare for another night hunt. Infestations tend to get worse under the cover of darkness. When rats feel safest to roam freely, armed with your trusty torch, your stick, and a renewed sense of purpose, you set out into the village's shadowy corners. Nighttime is a different world. The village quiets down, but your senses sharpen. The rats become bolder, scuttling across floors and walls, sometimes pausing to peer at you with glowing eyes. You move slowly, avoiding unnecessary noise, setting traps and ambushing their paths. It's exhausting work, but every rat caught is a victory. Sometimes you catch a big one, an alpha of sorts, and the satisfaction of ending its reign is immense. Other times, a whole nest is flushed out, sending a wave of frantic rats scrambling for safety. Despite your best efforts, the infestation persists, but you can see cracks in their control. Fewer raids on the food stores, more traps sprung, and villagers sleeping a bit easier. You're beginning to understand that rat hunting during an infestation is about persistence as much as skill. You're fighting an uphill battle, but you're not alone. The village is behind you. Your animal allies are on watch, and your own determination burns bright. Tomorrow, you'll face the aftermath, cleaning up, repairing damage, and preparing for the next wave. The war against rats is never truly over, but with each day, you make the village a little safer after the exhausting days and nights battling the overwhelming wave of rats. You're finally faced with what feels like the less glamorous but equally important task: clean up and repair. The village is battered, the granaries ravaged, and the once orderly barns turned into chaotic mazes of gnawed wood, shredded sacks, and rat droppings. It's a mess that could make even the most stoic peasant gag, and unfortunately, you're the one who has to deal with it. Your first priority is the granaries. These are the lifeblood of the village, storing the grain that will see everyone through harsh winters and poor harvests. But after weeks of rat raids, the storerooms look like the set of a horror play about vermin apocalypse. You have to sort through the damaged grain, tossing the mouldy, droppings-laden mess into bonfires to prevent further contamination. It's a bittersweet task, knowing that every handful of ruined grain could mean a famished family come winter. Cleaning out the droppings is no picnic either. Rat feces are not just disgusting, they're a real health hazard, carrying diseases that can make even a tough medieval villager seriously ill. You take no chances, sweeping, scraping, and washing down surfaces, all the while hoping your own immune system holds up. Soap is a luxury here, so you rely mostly on water and scrubbing with rough brushes. Your hands ache, your nose is raw from the stink, but you press on. Hygiene isn't just about comfort, it's about survival. Repairs come next. Wooden beams gnawed through, doors chewed at the edges, and walls scratched by desperate claws all demand immediate attention. You, the village carpenter's apprentice, take pride in patching up the damage with whatever materials are at hand. Sometimes It means crafting new planks from freshly hewn wood. Other times, it's a quick fix with mud, straw, and nailed-on scraps. Each repair is a small victory, a sign that life and order can return. The rats aren't just after grain. They've wrecked kitchen tools, food stores, and even household items. A neighbour's favourite basket lies shredded, and the smith's workshop shows signs of nocturnal raids, with bits of leather and scraps missing. You remind yourself that your work isn't just about catching rats, it's about restoring the village's spirit and its ability to thrive. In the midst of all this, you also notice the toll on your fellow villagers. Many are weary, their faces drawn from sleepless nights and worry. Children avoid the damaged barns, shying away from the reminders of the invasion. Some villagers whisper about curses and bad luck, blaming the infestation on everything from poor farming to divine punishment. You listen, but try to keep morale up with stories of progress and hope. Interestingly, some village elders advocate for drastic measures, including burning down the worst-hit buildings entirely. The idea is brutal, but pragmatic. Destroy the rats' nests and start fresh. While you understand the logic, the thought of losing precious storage and shelter weighs heavily. Destruction feels like surrender, and the village isn't ready for that. You recall an old story about a neighbouring village that tried a similar scorched earth approach, only to find rats returning faster than before. Driven underground, but not defeated, it's a lesson in resilience, both for rats and people. You know that persistence, not destruction, will be your strongest ally. During cleanup, you also observe how nature begins to reclaim the damaged spaces. Weeds sprout through cracks in the floors, moss grows on forgotten walls, and wildflowers bloom near collapsed fences. It's a bittersweet reminder that life goes on, even amid destruction. There's also an unexpected benefit. The damaged granaries, once cramped and overstocked, now have more space as ruined sacks are discarded. This allows for better organisation and air circulation, reducing future risks of spoilage and infestation. Small silver linings like these keep you motivated. Your work extends beyond physical repairs. You take part in village meetings, sharing knowledge about rat behaviour and prevention strategies. You talk about the importance of storing grain off the ground, sealing cracks promptly, and maintaining cleanliness around homes. You become a respected voice in the community, combining practical skills with a deep understanding of the pest problem. A quirky medieval fact you share with the villagers involves the use of certain herbs, plants thought to repel rats. Mint, wormwood, and pennyroyal are among favourites, often placed in sacks or hung near storage areas. While not foolproof, these natural repellents add a layer of defence and comfort. You joke that the village might smell like a medieval perfume shop, but if it keeps the rats away, who's complaining? You also push for the expansion of your team of animal allies. More cats are encouraged to stay in the village, ferrets are bred carefully, and even a few birds of prey are welcome to the outskirts. It's a comprehensive approach, combining human efforts with nature's own defences. Meanwhile, your own health continues to be a concern. The constant exposure to rat-infested environments leaves you vulnerable to infections. You nurse minor wounds carefully and avoid contact with any sick rats or fleas. You're aware that the plague is lurking somewhere in the background, carried silently by fleas that feast on these very rats. The knowledge adds a layer of anxiety beneath your determined exterior. Still, you find moments of humour amid the grime. You and your fellow rat hunters trade stories about near misses, ferrets that went rogue, and cats that preferred lounging in the Lord's lap to chasing vermin. These stories bond you, turning a dirty, dangerous job into a shared adventure. As days turn into weeks, your village begins to recover. The granaries are secure again, the barns less chaotic, and the rat population slowly under control, the villagers' smiles return. Cautious but real, you feel a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing your tireless work made this possible. But you also know the war isn't over. Rats are persistent, and infestations can return with the changing seasons or shifts in village life. Your job is ongoing, a constant vigilance against the next wave. You end the day by walking through the village, appreciating the renewed order and the sense of community strengthened by adversity. The fight against rats has brought people together, reminding everyone that survival depends on cooperation, resilience, and sometimes a good sense of humour. Tomorrow, you'll dive into one of your most challenging tasks, dealing with the mysterious diseases the rats bring and the creeping fear that shadows every hunt. As the plague of rats and the even deadlier diseases they carried presses in on the village, you realise that catching rats and cleaning up after them isn't enough. The next crucial phase of your rat hunter duties is fortifying the village itself, rat-proofing homes, barns, and granaries with every trick, tool, and odd medieval contraption you can muster. The goal to build a fortress of defences that rats simply cannot breach. First, you tackle the granaries, the most tempting target for rodents hungry for the village's stored grain. You start by inspecting every nook and cranny, tiny holes in walls, gaps beneath doors, and cracks in stone foundations. Rats are masters of squeezing into impossibly small spaces. A hole the size of a coin is a welcome gateway to a feast. One of your favourite and slightly ridiculous innovations is using rat boards. These are strips of metal, sometimes sharpened, nailed around the base of doors or walls, creating a smooth, slippery surface that rats find impossible to climb. You laugh at the idea of a rat trying to scale a razor-sharp metal plank, but it works surprisingly well. The only downside is the occasional village cat that tries to cross and ends up sliding off with a yowl of surprise. You also use a mix of mortar and clay to seal cracks, working long hours patching up walls with whatever materials the village blacksmith and potter can spare. These repairs aren't always pretty, but function beats aesthetics when it comes to keeping rats out. Raising grain off the ground is another key strategy. You build wooden pallets and shelves inside the granaries to keep sacks away from floors, which rats can easily access. This simple change forces rats to climb, exposing them to traps or cats lying in wait. Sometimes you have to get creative. You rig up simple mechanical traps with counterweights and trigger mechanisms that can catch multiple rats at once. These contraptions sometimes backfire, dumping grain everywhere or startling villagers with unexpected noises. You explain these mishaps away as experimental engineering, but everyone knows it's just luck if a trap works as intended. The village smithy even crafts tiny metal spikes for door frames, designed to discourage rats from squeezing under. Walking past these without scraping your shin is a challenge, but the village elders insist they stay. Safety, they say, comes with a few scars. At night, you patrol the village, inspecting rat-proofing measures and resetting traps. You carry a lantern, its flickering light casting eerie shadows as you move silently through alleys and fields. The village feels transformed, less vulnerable, more resilient. You take pride in knowing your work has made a real difference. A quirky fact: some villages use garlic and onions hung near entrances, believing their strong smell repels rats, while there's little scientific proof. The pungent aroma certainly keeps the villagers awake, and the rats might just avoid these scents because they mask the smell of food. You joke that it's a win-win. One of the stranger methods you encounter involves sprinkling powdered sulphur around the village's perimeter. The smell is foul enough to clear a room, but it's thought to keep rats and evil spirits at bay. You're not sure if the rats are deterred by the sulphur or if they just move away to avoid the smell of human desperation. The village women, 2. Play a vital role in fortification. They help by keeping homes tidy, storing food in sealed containers made from pottery or woven baskets lined with pitch or tar. You learn that a clean home is a rat's nightmare, and hygiene, while challenging, is one of your best weapons. You also work with farmers to clear brush and debris near homes and barns. Overgrown hedges and piles of rubbish are rat havens. Removing these means fewer places for rats to hide and breed. It's a tough job, and you joke that rats probably hold secret meetings about your relentless efforts to ruin their neighbourhoods. Even with all these efforts, some rats are clever enough to adapt. You catch them digging new tunnels or gnawing through wooden beams in unexpected places. It's a game of cat and mouse, except you're both the cat and the mouse. The village's social structure shifts subtly as well, with rat-proofing becoming a community effort. Everyone feels a shared responsibility. Villagers exchange tips, share tools, and sometimes bicker over whose barn has the worst rat problem. You overhear jokes like, if the rats were any bigger, they'd be running the manor or better a rat than my mother-in-law, but not both at once. You also notice that rat-proofing efforts sometimes expose deeper issues. Cracks and holes weren't just for rats, they were a sign of long-neglected maintenance due to poverty or social inequality. Fixing these gaps means improving the overall village infrastructure, and your work inadvertently becomes part of a broader push toward better living conditions. Historians still debate how widespread and effective medieval rat-proofing really was, but your village's successes suggest that practical knowledge and community effort went a long way. Not all villages were as lucky or as well organised as yours. As days turn to weeks, you develop a deep satisfaction watching the rat population shrink and the damage lessen. Children play again near barns, granaries stay full, and the village's weary smiles begin to return. However, you remain vigilant. Rats are tenacious, and the threat of reinfestation looms with every season change. You know that your work must continue, adapting to new challenges and outsmarting your cunning foes. Tomorrow, you'll face one of your biggest challenges yet, handling the village's dark, forgotten places where rats thrive cellars, sewers, and abandoned buildings, and confronting the fears and superstitions that surround them. Your reputation as the village's rat hunter means you're often called upon for the most unpleasant jobs among these. The darkest and most dreaded are the forays into the village's forgotten corners, cellars, sewers, and abandoned buildings where rats breed unchecked and diseases fester. These shadowy places are no man's land, and stepping into them feels like crossing into a world ruled by vermin and darkness. As you approach the village cellar, a chill runs down your spine. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, mould, and something unmistakably foul. Your lantern flickers, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls slick with moisture. You can hear the faint skittering of tiny feet rats. No doubt, fully aware of your intrusion, it's a hostile environment, the perfect lair for your most cunning enemies. You steel yourself and descend the narrow steps, careful not to lose footing on the slick stones. Every sense is on high alert. Rats scatter at your approach, some bold enough to glare back before disappearing into holes too small for you to follow. The task ahead is clear. Flush them out, trap what you can, and seal off their refuges. The cellar is a maze of crates, barrels, and cobweb-laden corners. You start methodically, laying baited traps and blocking holes with whatever scraps of wood or mud you can find. The rats are numerous and clever. Some chew through soft barriers overnight. Others wait for the traps to be reset before venturing back. It's a war of attrition, and your patience is tested. A quirk of medieval sanitation is the village's primitive sewer system, or lack thereof. Instead of modern pipes, waste often collects in open ditches or rudimentary trenches outside the village or beneath the streets. These places are a breeding ground, not just for rats but for disease-carrying fleas. You avoid them when you can, but sometimes the infestation forces you to brave the stink and the muck. One particularly memorable day, you are tasked with clearing an abandoned house on the village outskirts. The place has been empty for years, windows boarded up, walls crumbling, yet the rats have made it a bustling metropolis. As you enter, your boots sink into piles of debris and droppings. You lose count of how many rats dart past your legs, their glowing eyes reflecting your lantern's light. This job is less about catching rats and more about sheer survival. You set traps, bang on walls to flush out nests, and occasionally have to chase rats down tunnels or rafters. The noise draws curious villagers, who watch from a safe distance, muttering prayers and offering sympathetic shouts. Your efforts are a spectacle, a grim, rat-chasing circus. The work is physically demanding and emotionally draining. You fight the urge to gag, the constant exposure to filth a health hazard. You swear you've developed an immunity to the smell. Though others disagree, you joke that your nose has become a finely tuned rat radar, able to detect vermin from yards away. The village elders warn you about the dangers of superstition tied to these dark places. Some believe that rats in the sewers are cursed, servants of evil spirits or demons. Others think that disturbing these nests might unleash a plague of worse horrors. These fears weigh on you, but also make your job harder. Villagers are hesitant to support your efforts, fearing you might stir bad luck. You counter these worries with practicality and humour. You tell stories about how rats are less spooky than a bad meal or a stiff tax, and that facing them head-on is the best way to keep the village safe. Your humour helps, but deep down, you understand the power of belief and how fear shapes human behaviour. Amidst the grime, you find strange relics, discarded bones, old coins, even the occasional lost trinket, reminders of lives long past. The sewers and cellars are like underground museums, filled with history as much as rats. You sometimes wonder about the stories behind these artifacts, the people who once lived above, oblivious to the world beneath their feet. An interesting historical tidbit: medieval cities and villages often had designated gong farmers, workers who cleaned out cesspits and sewers, considered some of the most dangerous and low-status jobs. You sympathise with them. Your rat hunting has a similar stench of lowly toil. But unlike them, you're at least somewhat celebrated. You reflect on the resilience required to work in these conditions, the grime, the danger of disease, the fear and superstition. It takes more than courage. It takes a commitment to the village's survival. You find yourself becoming part historian, part scientist, part warrior. Despite all precautions, you occasionally suffer scratches and bites. Each one is a reminder of the risks. You nurse wounds carefully and pray for good health, knowing that a single infection could be deadly in this era. You also begin to experiment with rudimentary protective gear, thick gloves, layers of clothing, even a crude mask fashioned from cloth soaked in vinegar and herbs. It doesn't make you look like a plague doctor, but it offers some comfort. You joke that if anyone saw you, they'd think you were headed to a costume party rather than a rat nest. As you finish clearing the cellar and sealing off the worst holes, you feel a mix of triumph and exhaustion. You've pushed the rats back, but you know they will try again. The underground war is ongoing, a silent battle beneath the village's feet. Walking back through the quiet village streets, you appreciate the clean air and the warmth of the hearth fires. The contrast between surface life and subterranean darkness is stark above ground. The village is recovering below. The rats still plot their next move. You end the day by sharing stories and tips with fellow villagers, emphasizing the importance of cleanliness and vigilance. You're building more than defences, you're fostering a culture of prevention and resilience. Tomorrow promises new challenges, training the next generation of rat hunters and ensuring your village's legacy of vigilance continues. By now, your role as the village's rat hunter has become something of a local legend. You're not just a pest controller, you're a symbol of persistence, a guardian against the chaos that furry invaders bring. But all legends need successors, and today you face one of your most important responsibilities, training the next generation of rat hunters. The village children watch you with wide eyes, a mix of fascination and horror as you demonstrate your tools and techniques. Their eager faces remind you of your own early days, the thrill of discovery mixed with the inevitable dread of crawling through rat-infested barns. You know that passing on your knowledge isn't just about survival, it's about empowering the village to fend for itself in your absence. You start with the basics. You teach the young ones how to identify signs of infestation, the telltale gnaw marks on wood, the droppings scattered near food stores, the faint but unmistakable musky odour that signals rat presence. They listen intently, some trying to suppress squeals of disgust. When you describe rat droppings in detail, you can't blame them. No one likes the idea of critters pooping everywhere, but it's a reality they must face. Next comes the art of trap setting. You demonstrate how to bait simple spring traps with cheese or bacon rinds, explaining the importance of placement near walls, under beams in dark corners. The children fumble with the traps, sometimes snapping their fingers or startling themselves with the loud clicks. You chuckle and remind them it's all part of the learning curve. You also teach patience. Rat hunting isn't about quick thrills, it's a long game. Some days yield plenty of catches, others none at all. You stress that persistence, observation, and adaptability are key. You share stories of your own failures and successes, making the lessons relatable and less daunting. The village elders pitch in, offering historical wisdom and old wives' tales. Some are practical, others amusingly superstitious. You encourage the children to question everything, blending tradition with practical knowledge, a balance that keeps the village grounded yet open to innovation. A fun fact you slip in: medieval rat hunters sometimes use ferrets, not just for hunting, but as living traps. The ferret would chase rats into nets or traps, but occasionally. The ferret itself would get lost or refuse to come back. You tell the children to be kind to these furry helpers, or they might just adopt a new owner instead. Your training also covers hygiene and safety. You warn about the dangers of bites, scratches, and exposure to fleas. You teach how to wash hands with vinegar, treat wounds, and recognise early signs of illness. The children's eyes widen at the mention of the plague, but you keep your tone light, focusing on preparedness rather than fear. You introduce simple protective gear: gloves made from thick leather, cloth masks soaked in herbs, and boots sturdy enough to handle mud and debris, though rudimentary. These measures give the children confidence and a sense of professionalism. You organise practical exercises. Groups of trainees inspect the granary, set traps in the barns, and patrol the village edges. You watch proudly as they develop their own techniques and share tips. The energy is contagious, hopeful, determined, and just a bit mischievous. One afternoon, you set up a mock infestation scenario using bundles of straw and hidden rat decoys made from cloth and sticks. The children race to find and trap the decoys, laughing and cheering each other on. It's a moment of joy amid hard work, reinforcing camaraderie and teamwork. You also teach about the village's natural defences: cats, ferrets, even birds of prey. You explain how to care for these allies, ensuring they have food and shelter so they'll stick around and keep rat numbers down. The children are fascinated, especially by stories of brave barn cats who patrol the night and ferrets who slip through tunnels like furry ninjas. An unexpected challenge arises when one of the older trainees, a boy named Tom, expresses fear of the rats. His eyes fill with tears at the thought of touching a rat or being bitten. You reassure him gently, sharing your own early fears and how courage grows with experience. You encourage him to start small, observing rats from a distance, setting traps with a friend, learning at his own pace. His determination inspires the others. Training the next generation isn't just about skills, it's about building resilience, community, and hope. You see in these young faces the future of your village, a future where rat infestations are met not with despair, but with preparation and confidence. As the days pass, the children's skills improve, they start taking on more responsibilities, and you step back, watching with pride. Your village is becoming stronger, better equipped to face the challenges ahead. You close training sessions with a mix of humour and wisdom. You remind the young hunters that rats are cunning, messy, and sometimes downright annoying, but they are also part of the world you live in, learning to live with and manage. These challenges is a mark of maturity and survival. You joke that someday these trainees might even teach you a thing or two, a prospect that keeps you humble and eager to learn yourself. Tomorrow, you'll explore the unexpected benefits your village gains from your relentless battle with rats' economic shifts, social changes, and even cultural quirks born from living on the edge of vermin chaos. As your days of rat hunting and teaching come to a close, you start to notice something remarkable. The village is changing in ways you hadn't fully anticipated. Your tireless efforts against the rats have triggered a ripple effect, reshaping not only the physical landscape, but the social and economic fabric of the community. It's a curious kind of victory, not just against vermin, but for the future of your village. For starters, the granaries and storage areas you've repaired and fortified have become symbols of newfound abundance. With less grain lost to rats, more food reaches the tables of peasants and lords alike. Families who once struggled through harsh winters now find they have surpluses, and the improved harvest security encourages farmers to experiment with new crops and techniques. The threat of famine, always lurking in the background, feels just a little less ominous. The economic boost isn't limited to food. Your carpentry work fixing barns and homes brings more business to the village smithy and tradespeople. The need for rat-proofing materials, metal strips, stronger locks, sturdier doors creates a small but steady demand for blacksmiths and woodworkers. Suddenly, the village's economy buzzes with activity, like a hive stirred by a persistent beekeeper. Socially, the shared struggle against the rats knits the community closer. Neighbours who once barely spoke now exchange tips, tools, and occasionally good-natured jabs about who has the worst rat problem. This camaraderie spills into village festivals, market days, and even the weekly church service. People laugh more, talk more, and lean on each other a bit more. Solidarity born of hardship. Interestingly, you also observe how the battle against rats influences village culture and folklore. Tales of rat hunts, clever traps, and legendary barn cats become the stuff of storytelling. These stories blend fact and fantasy, turning your efforts into legend. Children mimic your heroic exploits in their games, pretending to chase invisible vermin with sticks and nets. You notice an odd tradition emerging: the rat feast, a yearly event where villagers celebrate their survival and the hard work that keeps rats at bay. The feast features dishes made from the very crops your rat-proofing helped save, as well as humorous skits and songs about rats' misadventures. It's a quirky, joyful acknowledgement that even the worst problems can be faced with laughter and resilience. From an historical perspective, Your village's experience echoes larger trends seen across medieval Europe. Rat infestations were common, and communities that developed effective defences often saw improvements in health, economy, and social cohesion, while some villages succumbed to the devastating impacts of plague and famine. Others, like yours, found ways to adapt and thrive. Your story, though small, fits into this grand mosaic of survival and change. A particularly intriguing fact you share with villagers, and which historians debate, is how rat infestations may have indirectly influenced the course of medieval pandemics by controlling rat populations. Your village may have lessened the impact of diseases spread by fleas, such as the plague, while the exact relationship is complex and still studied by scholars. It highlights how small actions can have outsized consequences. Your own role evolves from hunter to mentor, leader, and keeper of village memory. You record your experiences, jotting down notes and sketches to pass on to future generations. You hope that your efforts will not only protect your village today, but prepare it for challenges yet to come. As you walk through the village at dusk, you reflect on the journey. From grim beginnings, battling relentless vermin, to nurturing a community that thrives in adversity. The path has been winding and often messy, yet it's a testament to human perseverance. The rats, once every villager's nightmare, have become a catalyst for growth and unity. And you, the medieval rat hunter, have become a part of something much larger than yourself. As night falls, the village quiets, lanterns flicker in windows, and the air is filled with the soft sounds of life continuing, children's laughter, the crackle of hearth fires, and the occasional distant meow of a cat on patrol. You settle down, knowing that tomorrow will bring new challenges, but also new opportunities. The world may be full of vermin and uncertainty, but it's also full of hope and resilience. And with that comforting thought, you drift into sleep, ready to face whatever the next day brings. As the soft darkness envelops you, imagine the village resting peacefully beneath a blanket of stars. The battles of the past days fade into the gentle rhythm of quiet nights and hopeful mornings. The hard work, the dirt, the noise all become distant memories, replaced by the soothing hum of life carried forward. There is comfort in knowing that even the smallest actions, patching a hole, setting a trap, sharing a laugh, can ripple outward, shaping a future filled with possibility. The rats, though persistent, are not invincible, neither is the spirit of those who stand against them. Tonight, as you close your eyes, feel the strength of community, resilience and humour wrapping around you like a warm cloak. The world, with all its challenges, is still a place where life finds a way, where stories of survival become legends whispered by firelight. Rest now, and dream of brighter days ahead, where every shadow holds the promise of dawn, and every challenge met is a step toward a better tomorrow. Good night.